And now we're back, and we're joined by one of the OGs of the Dynasty community, someone who's been around since before me, at least in the Twitter community, the DLF community, someone who, if not for them, I would not be where I am in this chair hosting this podcast, and that is Tim Stafford. How are you doing today, Tim?
You're too kind. I'm doing well. But you're much too kind. You guys have been doing wonderfully. I can't believe it's a whole year since you guys started this one up. It's impressive. It's harder than people might realize. It's more. It's enjoyable to do these podcasts, and it's really fun to be able to come on once in a while. But doing it week in and week out, it's a freaking grind.
Yeah, it is a grind, but I love it. I mean, you did it for a long time. I think you and Jarrett, started the DLF podcast. Like, I mean, I'm just guessing around about maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I want to say that we kind of, I feel like we hit 100 episodes, and at that point, like, we started to bring in a lot more folks. But that first 100 episodes was a lot. But yeah, it's really fun, and like, I'm sure you found this. You get a special kind of fan on the podcast. Like, the Twitter fans are one thing, but the podcast fans are like a whole nother level. And I found always to be arguably much more supportive.
Oh, absolutely. And I have radio shows that I listen to all the time, whether it's Sirius XM, whether it's local shows. And like, I feel like I know those guys. And just like, I get messages from people that know like specific facts about me that I didn't even realize I shared. And they're like, oh, you like this food or this music or this beer. And like, I don't even remember saying that. And like, people know stuff about me, and like, it's very cool, and it's very humbling. And, I mean, you and Jarrett really paved the way for a lot of us. I think it was right around the 100 episode mark of the DLF podcast that Eric and I jumped on with you guys. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you are definitely one of the smartest original minds in the game. So, I wanted to bring you on. I wanted to thank you. I mean, I think you've done a few either guest appearances or like also guest hosting spots for us over the past year. So you've definitely been, if anything, and at the very least, an unofficial part of the team, at the very most, family with most of us as far as like the fantasy community goes. So I wanted to ask you, the theme of the night is, what have you learned in the past year when it comes to Dynasty fantasy football?
Yeah, I think, what have I learned? I think two things would jump to my mind. The first thing, and, it's funny, and it's as you know, I'm just not as close to, I just haven't had the time over the past 12 or 18 months to do fantasy as much as I'd like. So you start to make the mistakes that you would have never made, and it's like you just get sloppy. I think one of the two things that I learned in the last year that I think is important is and I think it's apropos for this time of year, you definitely do not need to field a dynasty starting lineup in April. And sometimes you feel like it's like there's this, at least for me, you hit the end of, maybe the playoffs in the NFL, and I love the playoffs. Absolutely love watching NFL playoffs. And I'm kind of done with fantasy, and it's nice. You take a break, maybe you get away from it. But about now, this time, it's like, okay, I want to start making some trades, start thinking about what your lineup could be coming into the NFL draft, and certainly coming out of the NFL draft. But man, don't think like that. Stay true to the dynasty attitude of, it's all about acquiring value and doing trades that make sense for your team as a whole and amassing value. And do not worry about the fact that you need to have, 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs and quarterback and a tight end starting week 1, because you got plenty of time to figure out that starting lineup.
I've already received questions, not only just on Twitter, but from actual friends of mine just texting me like, what do you think? I only got these 4 running backs. Is that going to be enough? And I'm like, dude, that you don't have to worry about that yet. And I've even people heading into the rookie draft, they're saying, well, I really need a running back on my team. Well, do you know that yet? Do you know that your second string guy isn't going to become the first string guy? I mean, last year we saw Cameron Brate and ASJ battle it out in camp, and the coaches kept telling us, Cameron Brate's better. He's got a rapport with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston likes him better. We see the beat guys saying that that he's getting more snaps with the first team offense. And yet the people that thought they had ASJ as their starter were like, oh, great, I have this guy. And people who had Cameron Brate and, Lance Kendricks and whoever else, some stable of guys that they didn't think were going to do anything, they came on. So you could see it from both point of views. You don't want to be uncomfortable looking at your team because you don't have enough talent dispersed across your roster. But you also don't want to get cocky and think, oh, I got ASJ or whoever the equivalent is at other positions, and think that you're just fine. And I like how you put it. You want to do what's best for your team overall, not for certain positions.
Yeah, it's an easy trap to fall into. I mean, you get worried because people in your league think that if you're missing maybe you only have one running back, you need to start two. It's like you worry, well, as you get closer to the season, will people try and take advantage of that, knowing that you are kind of in that pinch with respect to the trade? But you shouldn't think like that, because to your point, we don't have any idea what's going to happen week one, especially at running back. And that kind of dovetails into the second thing. I got cooked this time last year on running back injuries. I mean, you especially at running back, I had a lot of shares of Deion Lewis last year. I think you did.
Yeah, I did too.
And I did not believe Jamal Charles was as hurt as it turns out that he was. I thought he was a great buy low last year at this time. So it kind of plays off my first point. But what I'll tell you is this. I'm sure there are lots of folks out there who have followed the philosophy that you guys on your podcast espouse, which is built around the wide receivers. And it's become more difficult. I mean, the running backs are more important. There's probably a lot of people who listen to your show who are out there weak at running back at this point. My advice to you is just wait. I would wait until week 2 or week 3, even in the season, before you buy running back production. You'll always be able to buy running back production. Right now, you're going to pay the price and you're predicting. You have no idea. So you're gambling and paying the price. Whereas week 2 or week 3, you'll be paying the price, but you'll at least know what's out there. There will be, this year's Alfred Morris, or there's going to be that guy that nobody saw coming, who isn't really all that good, but he'll be able to put up numbers for you.
Wait a second, is Alfred Morris not all that good? Is that what you're saying?
Well, relative to the production that he put up momentarily.
Yeah, I think Jason would disagree with us, but I agree with you. I mean, I sit there and wait, and when I have a guy like I drafted last year in Chris Thompson and just let him be my RB1. I know that sounds horrible, but I mean, the team I was able to build around that with not much production from the running backs was really great. And then I snagged Jalen Richard, and I had Kristen Michael for a couple of weeks, which was free. As much as I made fun of him over the years, it was nice to snag him for free and ride him out for a couple games. And then, you know what I did? I moved on from those guys. I sold them. I sold them because there's going to be more Chris Thompsons and more Jalen Richards. And then I can build up and get like Brashad Perriman for cheap, when a guy like Chris Thompson, who I really liked, but I never thought he was going to be a long-term answer or long-term value or anything like that. And a guy like Brashad Perriman, who was very low in productivity, very low in assumed value. So I think I swapped them in one league. And that's what I want to do. Did you ever, what is that game? It's not Othello. What is the game called? This is great for radio when I can't even remember the game. Backgammon. Do you ever play backgammon?
Yeah. I used to play a ton in college, but it's kind of, I haven't played in years.
But you know how you want to get your, I don't know if they're called chips, whatever they're called, to the end point, and then you stack them there and you forget about them. That's kind of what I want to do with wide receivers. Is I want to get the wide receivers, the stud wide receivers, put them on my roster and forget about them. I'm not shopping those guys unless an offer comes to the table that's, amazing that I can't refuse. And I want to put them there and I want to forget about them. And then I want to churn out those running backs and then move those backgammon pieces to more awesome wide receivers and put them there and forget about them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'll say this too, maybe wrap up the running back piece. I think if you've got some of the guys you've talked about, maybe Rob Kelly, these guys, I'd be selling, because I'm telling you, this draft, there are going to be a lot of those guys who get churned out in favor of the rookies. We have some rookies who are really good, and they're going to come in and make, week one, month one hits in the NFL. So some of these guys who produced last year, I mean, I'm telling you, it's going to be a 1 year production, because we got guys coming in.
We forget some of the names of these guys so quickly that it doesn't even seem real that the running backs get churned through so fast in the NFL.
Javorius Allen. Buck Allen.
Buck Allen. I was on him a little
example,
bit.
Right?
And a million more examples, yeah. Did you say you had another thing that you learned this year?
Yeah, I guess the other thing, and this is props to you guys, man. I'll tell you what, there is a big gap between being good at fantasy and being semi-pro like you. The time, you get away from it like I have. The time required to be in the know and really, a quasi expert. It's like it's always difficult when I was doing it like you are to refer to yourself as an expert. It's like can you really say that you're not? I mean, I guess that's something somebody else tells you are, but the time required to do that is enormous. I can bluff my way through it, but I'm nowhere near where I was 2 years ago when I was doing it, or 4 years ago when I was doing it really truly full time. So my hat's off to you guys with I think sometimes the listeners probably take you for granted and don't. I would tell you, I'd love for a listener to try and do 4 or 5 podcasts in a row and realize how much knowledge you have to be able to pull it out kind of minute by minute in a live show to be able to do what you do. So I'm nowhere near. I don't have the edge that I once had. It's fun. It's fun to come on every now and again, but I will be the first to admit I'm not where I once was. So we as listeners appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like if there's something to be learned from that, I think that the listeners, at the very least, they're somewhat passionate enough at the very least to listen to a Dynasty podcast. So they want information. They want that. So they're invested. And so it sounds like what you say is, if you want to be better at your opponents, which I'm assuming people are listening to this because they want to win, they're probably monetarily invested in some case, and also for bragging rights. You want to be better than your friends. A lot of people are playing than their friends. So it sounds like what you're saying is, if you want to be better, you got to put a little bit of time into it. You know what I do? I have Roto World updates on my phone, so I know right away when a free agent signing happens or when there's speculation about a player. And I look at the measurables on different sites like Player Profiler, and I'm looking at the grades at PFF, which I don't take those as gospel, but I do look at that. So yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, but also for something for the listeners to know is if you want to be better, then you got to put a little bit more time in than your opponent.
But it's right, and I think it was probably like 2011, 2012 when I was doing this really hardcore. And for me, I knew I was pretty hardcore when Monday was spent throughout the day watching the shortcuts of all of the games and making sure I'd seen every play of every NFL game. I guess maybe in this day and age, there's enough people out there like PFF because PFF was doing what they do, but it was much different than what it is now. It wasn't nearly as mainstream. They certainly weren't. I don't even know if they are owned by ESPN or whatever their deal is there. But it took a lot of time. But if you invest that time and you want to do that, you can get good. But man, if you will quickly realize that information, that knowledge gets stale. The process that remains the same, but there's no way to cheat the process by. There's no shortcuts. You have to do the work, and I'm sure you are able to. How to go and get that information. You've got your process down. But for me, there's no substitute for investing the time and really watching the actual film and seeing the players, because otherwise it's just the echo chamber, right? And for me, I always wanted to be able to say that I'd watched all the plays, or at least 85% of them. And now that I don't have time to do that, I miss it. And I find myself relying much more heavily on guys like you and Eric to make sure that I'm at least have an edge on my competition who's doing even less. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, no doubt. And I want to thank you for coming on. As I mentioned before, me and you go way back, and even though this podcast has sprung into, you know, different waters than what it once was, it definitely originated with an idea that you put forth. So thanks again for coming on, and we'll be joined soon by our last guest of the day. All right, Tim. Well, thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks, bro. That was fun. It was good getting on.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you just want the you have, you know, there's so I've been doing every week now. I don't know. I guess you have noticed.
I've noticed that. I've been listening. I listen.
Jarrett pretty much took an indefinite leave. He's got a lot going on with family and everything. So
yeah, he and I talked about that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, I'm happy to come on. Like I said, I just you know, consistent with what I just said, man. You guys are really, you know, you do such a good job. You know, I'm sometimes half embarrassed to be on. So, but I'm more than happy to come and join you and kind of, you know, we can talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, bounce ideas off one another. But I don't profess to be, you know, to know the sixth guy on any wide receiver depth chart at this point.
Right. All right. Well, if you ever get the urge, man, just feel free to hit me up. And then, you know, if Eric or Jason can't do a week, you know, I'll
you please do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ping me if you've got an opening and you need somebody to step in, because I'm more than happy to do it.
Yeah, no doubt. But like I said, if you get the urge, both of them kind of like are a little bit like going back and forth. Like, are you going to do this week? Are you going to do this week? So if they both got a week off sometime, I'm sure they would take it. So feel free if you.
Got it, bro. I will do it. I look forward to it. Maybe we can do something a bit after the draft.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a good rest of your Sunday, and I'll talk to you soon.
You too, man.
All right. Bye.